Welcome to the Castle of Spirits podcast, episode number 6. In today's episode, we're going to tell you some stories, right?
Scary stories,
Scary stories. True paranormal stories, straight from your fingertips, right back to your ears.
By way of the Castle of Spirits library of 4,600 plus true reader-submitted ghost stories.
We're going to have to change that soon. Very, very soon.
Because we're getting new submissions.
Yeah, we're going to be at 4,700 soon.
Oh.
I'm going to keep an eye on it. I'm going to keep it updated. Maybe we'll have a big party when it hits 5,000.
All right. Can we get pizza?
Duh.
And ice cream?
No.
All right. But if we get 6,000 before
then
we
we
hit
can have
5,000, then we can have ice cream.
If we had 6,000 before we hit 5,000?
Before, yeah. What if it's like overnight, all of a sudden we
He
get
doesn't
1,000?
know math, folks.
Yeah.
Anyway, welcome to the Castle of Spirits podcast, hosted by yours truly. I'm the Ghost Keeper Jane, and
I'm Ghost Keeper Vince. Pleased to meet you.
Again. So
this is the first episode that we've recorded since the website has been officially launched.
Yeah.
And on October 1st, and since the podcasts have gone live, of which we released 4 on the first day, number 5 on the 5th, and now here we are for number 6.
Yeah. So this is officially the first episode we've recorded knowing that someone is going to be listening. The other ones, you know, we still had the chance to pull it back and say, no, we're not going to put the podcast out there, but it's out there now. So we're doing the thing and we're enjoying it, and we hope you are too.
I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Me too. So with the relaunch of the website and the launching of the podcast, what's been fun or exciting or surprising to you this week, Vince?
Oh, one of the cool things that happened was that I went through, in episode 2, we talked about our visit to Alcatraz Island. We did the tour back in the early 2000s. Well, I found those photos. I found the Alcatraz ghost photo that I took some 20 years ago.
The one that we talked about in episode 2?
In episode 2.
Ooh.
And I put that up.
It was gone forever.
I posted it to our Instagram page. Put a link to it in the show notes for episode 2. So if you're hearing this and you're interested in checking out the photograph and hearing the story about it, listen to episode 2.
And follow us on Instagram, obviously.
Yeah, so I found that photograph and I was excited by it because I hadn't really laid eyes on it in a very long time.
Yeah, it was a little bit different. The photo was a little bit different than I remembered. I felt like I remembered a bunch of people visible in the photo, but then the guy looked strange and was somehow taller than them or whatever, but there's no one, and you can't see anyone in the photo except this man. So yeah, I thought it was a lot creepier than I remembered it being.
Well, what's interesting about the picture is that he's staring straight into the camera. He's not close to the camera, but he's staring straight at the camera. Like he's saying, I know you're taking my picture. And I would think that if I was taking a snapshot and I had somebody dead in the center of the lens of my disposable camera, that I would have remembered that and maybe taken note and said, oh, yeah, at least...
Or not taken the photo.
Or at least have noted to myself that the guy was standing there, and I remember looking at this dude. He was very unique looking. He looked like he was a guy like maybe in his late 50s or 60s with a long gray beard.
Yeah.
What I think...
And long hair and some kind of a cap or a hat.
Yeah, now that I look at it, do you remember the movie Escape from Alcatraz? They all wore these caps in the yard because it was cold out because, you know, San Francisco.
The coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Of Mark Twain.
It's attributed to Mark Twain, but I don't think it really is.
Whatever.
So yeah, go check out that
looks
picture.
Like he's wearing one of those caps.
So yeah, go check out that picture and let us know what you think.
Yeah.
Is it a real ghost photo or is it just a normal person?
You decide.
But tell us about it after.
Yes. Do email us. Our email address. I realize we never tell our email address. You can either contact us through the website on the FAQ page, or you can just email us directly at COSGhostKeepers. That's keepers with an S at the end at gmail.com.
So what about What do you have to say for this last week since the last recording?
I feel like I don't know what to do with myself since the website launched.
Yeah.
Because I've been, it's getting the stories and everything off of the old website and, building the new website and making sure everything works properly and runs properly. It's been all consuming since, what was it, June? When we were handed the keys to the castle.
Right.
And suddenly it's just done. And I feel like an empty nester. I feel like I don't know what to do with myself. So, but I'm getting more painting done these days, which is nice. I didn't paint a ton during the remodeling phase. And now that that's done, I might as well go paint today.
Are you painting spooky things?
Have we met? But this is not a podcast to promote me and my painting. It's a podcast about telling your true paranormal stories. Right, Vince?
That's right.
So do you have a story picked out that you'd like to read to the fine folks today?
I did pick out a story that I wanted to read, and it has to do with another bit of news that we forgot to mention.
Oh.
The fact that we have brand new stories on the Castle of Spirits website from readers.
Mm-hmm. We have new stories for October of 2022, and that's the first time that there have been new stories on the website since, was it November of 19? So make sure you head on over to castlespirits.com/
Just castleofspirits.com.
Yeah.
/ghost-stories doesn't really roll off the tongue.
No, it doesn't, but it's there. So head over to the Castle of Spirits website and check out the news stories for October. And please know that there are already a batch of stories building for November. So we've got more news stories coming. Yay. So how does that bit of news fit in with the story that you're reading today?
Well, the story I'm reading today is a new submission.
Ooh.
One of the new submissions, one of the many awesome new submissions we got.
Yay.
And it's from Ron in Michigan. Now, Ron messaged us and said he's very excited to see his story on a website that he literally grew up reading.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's so awesome about this site is that, we were full-grown adults by the time we discovered the website. But, there are people out there who were in their teens and preteens, and now they're full-grown adults themselves, and they grew up on the website.
Yeah. I don't know very many websites that can, lay claim to such a legacy.
No, and I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of Ron for submitting the story. Ron wrote a story called "The Farmhouse from Hell."
Mm.
Now, this story is extremely detailed. It's also extremely long.
Mm-hmm.
I love the energy that went into it. It's very awesome. In the interest of time, I'm going to read a couple of my favorite sections from the story, but I encourage everybody to go to the website. I'm going to put the link to the story in the show notes for this podcast so that you can read the full story yourselves and sort of allow this to be an introduction to the story by Ron from Michigan that is The Farmhouse from Hell. I grew up on my grandparents' farm in the thumb of Michigan in a house that dated back to the 1800s. It was an unnerving place with 2 floors and a Michigan basement layered with gray asbestos siding. Growing up, I heard a story about its past and learned firsthand that it was anything but a lie. My mother, father, aunts, and uncles all had their own experiences. They also told me the backstory of the place. After World War I, the owner of the house had just returned home. His family and friends were all glad to see him, and they wished to throw a celebration. That night during the party, they ran out of wine, so since it was his home, he went to the basement to fetch more. He stored barrels of wine down there and chose to bring a full one up. The stairs that led to the basement were steep with 13 in total, all made of concrete. As he reached the top with the barrel on his shoulder, he tripped and fell. He plummeted to the very base of the stairs onto his back with the barrel landing on his head. It's needless to say, he didn't make it. Since that day, odd things happened in that house. My family told me of lights turning on and off, random footsteps, voices from nowhere, and items that would vanish and reappear in strange locations. I always felt uneasy in that house, even before I heard those stories. One night, I learned for myself that they were very, very true. My father was a farmer and often worked late to get jobs done, so I occasionally stayed up late past my bedtime to say goodnight to him. That night was one of those nights. I would wait patiently while everyone slept to hear the sound of his footsteps up the stairs. I assume I'd been lying awake for an hour when I heard the first footstep at the base of the stairs. I lifted my head off the pillow and waited for him to come up. I waited. One more footstep slowly followed. I said, "Good night, Daddy." There was no reply. The footsteps ceased as well. At that point, I figured he had forgotten something and went back downstairs. I laid my head back down, and no more than a second later, I heard another squeaky board in the stairs creak. Then I said, "Good night, Daddy." I was certain it was him, but once again, no reply, and the footsteps ceased. Being the level-headed kid I was, I thought nothing of it. Another creak on the stairs changed my mind about that. I knew there were 13 stairs. I then realized that had been the 5th one. If he were to have gone back down, wouldn't I have heard his steps as he descended? Another creak closer to the top. "Daddy?" I asked in a questioning voice. No reply, yet this time the footsteps didn't stop. They seemed faster in between, harder. 7. "Daddy?" I asked as I became more frantic. 8. 9. 10. Then they stopped again. I was terrified and curious, both at the same time. Nearly in tears, I asked the final time, "Daddy, is that you?" Silence was the only reply. I heard another stair begin to creak, this time very close to the top. Then another very slow creak. 12. 13. From where I was lying and how my bed was set up, I could clearly see down to the other end of the hall. To the right of the stairs was a window bringing in a bluish light from outside. It was then that I first saw it. It seemed to float from the top of the stairs as it blocked out most of the eerie light coming from the window. It was a tall, black, partially transparent figure with a hood or veil. I couldn't be sure which. It seemed to stop and stare at me, though it did not seem to have eyes, almost as if it knew I could see it. I kept my gaze locked on it for a minute or so. I couldn't move, I couldn't scream. I was paralyzed with fear. It was then that I did what any other child my age would do. I dove into the safety of my sheets. As I gathered my head, I reassured myself that what I saw was just a figment of my imagination. Then I heard them again, slow at first, growing closer. My dad came up right after this. I didn't tell him what had happened. I kept a lot of what I saw to myself, even though I was terrified. I just didn't want everyone to think I was crazy. Jumping ahead a little in the story, Ron recounts another terrifying incident. The basement was another place I felt uneasy in, but I grew accustomed to it over time. My brother and I even had a cool hangout spot down there. One night in particular, my friend John came over. We played video games and then decided to go to sleep. I slept soundly through the night and woke up the following morning to see that John was missing. I looked upstairs to find that he had slept up there instead. He told me he woke up feeling like he was being watched. Then he heard what sounded like scuffling footsteps on the concrete and heavy breathing. He ran upstairs and told me he would never sleep down there again. To be honest, I would never play down there alone, nor would I go down there by myself at night. There was always a feeling of dread and overwhelming pressure down there. You always had to look over your shoulder. Now, those were just a couple of my favorite parts of this story by Ron in Michigan. To read the full account, follow the show notes to The Farmhouse from Hell, October 2022. So, what did you think of that story?
I think that Ron is really adept at building tension in his story. So I loved the creek, 6, creek, 7. That was really, it built a lot of tension and anticipation. I really enjoyed that. So I haven't read that story all the way through yet either. So I need to do that now. That was a great story, Ron. Thank you.
Well, and Ron's story was just one of a good number of stories we received that were submitted by readers of the website. I'm just excited to share those with visitors to the castle. So.
Yeah. I was thinking that it might be fun if, now that we have new stories coming in every month.
New blood.
Right. That maybe every episode, one of us should read a story in the current month's submissions, and one of us can read an older story from the archives. What do you think of that?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
And now this was actually the newest story that I've ever read, because I've been kind of leaning towards the older stories, the old school. I just love the fact that we have an archive that goes back to 1997.
I know, that's cool. Yeah, that's the newest story that's been read on the podcast so far. Yeah, so maybe we'll take turns. Next episode, I'll read an older one and you read I'll read a newer one and you read an older one, or, whatever, we can switch hit.
So if you're interested in possibly getting your true story read on the podcast, submit to the website.
Yep. And, if it doesn't get read in the month that it's submitted, it doesn't mean it will never be read. Once the current month is over, it's now in the archive and it could be picked up
25 years from now.
25 years. Or, next month. So I have a story that I picked out for this episode, and it just so happens to be an older one. So we're already starting off on our, you do a new one, I'll do an old one, or vice versa thing. And I'm really super excited to read this story.
Yeah.
This has been my favorite. I think this is my favorite story in the Castle archive of all time. And it's actually included in the Spookiest Stories archive. So you won't find this one in the Ghost Story archive. You got to go to the Spookiest Stories archive for it. And I thought that you and I were going to end up fighting over who got to read this one. So I'm really excited that I got to it first. Can you guess which one it is?
Does it have something to do with a shadow?
No, I wouldn't really call it a shadow.
Shadow's edge?
Oh, yes, it does have a shadow's edge in it, yes. And I get to read it. I'm super excited.
Awesome. Well, the cool thing about it is that you read it and I get to enjoy it.
It's true. Out Past the Shadow's Edge, submitted by David in Utah, USA, from the Spookiest Stories archive. Every time I think of this story, it still gives me the chills, even after all these years. I remember that night very vividly. This happened to me about 16 years ago, right after I had gotten my driver's license and got to use my dad's car by myself for the first time. My girlfriend and I were excited to go to a dance at our high school that Saturday night, and I was more than a little nervous about driving the stick shift without Mom or Dad in the car with me, as I had a habit of killing the engine when I tried to start it. It was early October, but the air was still warm, and the moon was yellow and in a sickle form. There were dark storm clouds looming over the Wasatch Mountains and moving closer into the Salt Lake Valley. My girlfriend and I went to the dance and had a great time, staying way into the night. When the dance was over and after everyone had been sent away by the dance/school staff, we moved on. We drove around looking for some place to go, as the newness of being on our own with the car would not wear off for several more months. I picked the old grade school that we had both gone to when we were children. We were fairly close to where we lived, so we felt safe, and there was nothing to worry about except the looming rain clouds. We parked in the parking lot behind the school and walked into the huge grass playing field and the playground behind the school. The field was lit by one huge stadium-type lamp that cast a circle of dim light on the playground and playing field surrounding it. She and I sat on the swings talking way late into the night. It started raining a cool mist that was very pleasant, but after an hour or so, it was enough rain to make the ground under us muddy, so we were careful not to stick our feet in the mud. This is important in a minute. It became quiet, and we were both very tired by then. We suddenly looked up at the same moment. The hair stood up on the back of my neck, as we both felt the need to look back and over our left shoulders. Something had caught the corner of our eye. About 200 feet or so away, there was something crawling on its stomach out past the shadow's edge of the light that the giant stadium bulb gave off. We both stared in horror, not saying anything. We watched as the thing moved towards us, just keeping on the border of the light shadow. It was humanoid-looking, a dark color with no clothes on. It was laying flat on its belly, its arms down, held close to its waist. But what frightened me the most, besides the fact that it had been coming up behind us, was the way it moved and the structure of its legs. It was inching forward, moving nothing but its feet to push it forward. And the legs, if you look at a normal human's knees, the knees bend forward. This thing's was reverse. The joint bent back and away. Imagine laying flat on your stomach with your hands pulled in at your sides to your waist, and your knees are up off the ground instead of against it. We stared for several seconds. We both had stopped breathing, and the only sound was the rain falling. The head of the thing looked up, and I saw nothing but black pools where the eyes should be. My girlfriend and I jumped off the swings onto the wet grass and lunged into the car about 50 feet away. There was several seconds of panic when I couldn't get the car to start, and I was terrified to look up. I didn't want to see it closing on us. I didn't want to see those knees bending in the wrong direction and the black, soulless eyes. I was afraid I would pop the clutch in the car and not be able to start it again. I kept my head down and looking at the steering wheel. The car engine turned and caught. We tore off into the night. I called my folks from my girlfriend's house and told them about what had happened. They allowed me to stay there with her and her mom until the sun came up in a few hours. We waited and passed the time by telling her mother our story, which scared her as well as my parents badly. When the sun came up early that Sunday morning, we drove back to see if it was still there, this time bringing weapons. But there was nothing as we searched the field. As we poked around the swings we had been sitting on earlier, there were large, bare footprints that had tracked through the mud all around the very swings we were on. We both had had our shoes on, and as I said before, we were careful not to get mud on them, and we had not walked around and around like these tracks had. We found nothing but those bare tracks. Every once in a while, I get brave enough to go back to that field late at night. Never alone, though. I sit by the school field side in my truck with the high beams on, searching the area, but I've never seen it again. Thank you so much, David, in Utah, USA, for submitting that story. So, Vince, what do you think about that story?
Well, first of all, it takes place in Utah, and he said that they just come from a dance. Now, I thought I thought that dancing was illegal in Utah.
You did not think that.
I'm just kidding, of course. I've seen Footloose too many times. The original with Kevin Bacon, of course.
Well, we live in Utah, so you also know.
There's no castles in Utah.
This castle is now in Utah. But anyway, one of the reasons I feel like that story has such a strong impact on me is, several reasons. Obviously, it's in Utah, my home state. But the playground, the schoolyard area that he describes, I picture the schoolyard of the elementary school that I went to is very, very similar to the way he's describing it. So I keep picturing the elementary school yard where I went, and I can totally feel the whole thing. I think that when you can connect an actual place that and you're very familiar with to a story, it seems to make that story more real.
Yeah, kind of brings it alive in your imagination more.
Right. Whether it's actually about the place, like if you've been to Alcatraz a lot of times, or, you're very familiar with the place, then any stories about Alcatraz or any creepy ghost photos presented by the ghost keeper from Alcatraz, it might resonate with you a little bit more than if it's a place that you've never been to or you're not really very familiar with. So I think that that's one of the reasons that story is so impactful for me, because I can almost feel like it happened to me because I can totally picture that in a place that I know very, very well.
Well, and it's got an air about it that's sort of like a campfire tale.
Yeah.
The old campfire tale about the couple who's making out in the car up on Lover's Lane, or
the hook,
or and the hook in the door.
Yeah.
The radio broadcast.
Yeah, the urban legend type vibe. But I've never heard that story outside of this story, so I don't think it's like a local legend around here or anything. But yeah, I love that story. And it doesn't matter how many times I read it, that story always creeps me out when he starts describing the way it's pushing itself forward just with its feet and the knees being bent backwards. Oh.
So I don't know a whole lot about cryptids, but I wonder if the motion of the body, does it align with something? I'm almost thinking that it almost, the image I get in my head is of a very large grasshopper.
I kind of picture grasshopper type thing too. Yeah. Like almost like half human, half grasshopper. Because I don't really picture like a person, like a human, but something humanoid.
So is there such a thing as Grasshopper Man?
Oh, I don't know.
Or like you've got Mothman.
Grasshopper Man of Utah.
Yeah, I don't know that Grasshopper Man rolls off the tongue so easily.
Well, it gives a new meaning to Mormon cricket.
What is a Mormon cricket?
A Mormon cricket is a cricket. It's a bug. And I don't know if it's the locusts and like, they talk about, when the Mormons first settled and it was overrun by locusts, and then the seagulls came and ate all of the locusts. And so, the day was saved by the seagull, and now it's the state bird. So I don't know if that's what the Mormon cricket is. But anyway, a cricket has the legs that bend backwards. So this is the Mormon cricket man. Ooh.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've just created a brand new myth.
Well, I didn't.
Well, okay.
David did, and I just named it the Mormon Cricket Man.
So if there's anybody else out there in Utah
or
anywhere who saw a humanoid cricket man, get in contact with us.
Yeah.
Let us know. Tell us your story, because we'll be excited to hear it.
Yes. Please tell us if you've seen anything like that.
All that said, the skeptic in me wants to sit up and say, okay, so it was just some creeper.
With weird legs.
No, some creeper dude lying on his back, right? If you lie on your back and you scoot yourself around with your legs, your knees are going to go up, right?
Yeah.
So perhaps it was a trick of the light that made the person's appearance appear as if they were on their stomach.
Okay, maybe.
They could have been wearing a mask also.
Okay, maybe. But is that any less scary?
No. No.
In many ways, might it even be scarier?
To think that there's somebody out there crawling around.
Naked.
Right. Scooching around naked in the mud, making circles around, making out couples. Were they making out?
They were hanging out on the swings. I don't think you can really make out on swings.
So either way, it could have been somebody out there just trying to mess with you.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that really is, that could be scary. It was like the story you told a couple of podcast episodes ago about the person who was wandering around the graveyard at night.
Yeah.
It could have just been some weird person doing something weird.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes all kinds. But I don't want to impugn the credibility of the story at all.
Good, then don't.
So I won't.
Because I think it's scary, and
it's a classic.
It is a classic. And it's very classic.
It's got a great title.
And I think it's more likely that it's a creepy, gross, cryptid, ghost, cricket man thing than that it's some naked lunatic out there scooching around on his butt in a playground in the middle of the night to scare, a couple of kids. I think that seems rather unlikely to me.
If I had to,
I'm going with Mormon Cricket Man.
If I had to pick between the two, I'd rather it be a humanoid cricket man.
Yeah,
who's just out doing his own little innocent thing, not even aware that he's making circles around people.
He's just looking for a meal.
Yeah, and then he decided that these are too big for me. I'll wait till something much smaller comes along, and nothing ever did. So maybe he moved on.
All right, David. It's official. We have voted your story true. It's Cricket Man.
So okay. Now I have to ask: have you ever seen anything like that yourself? Not a cricket man, but something that you cannot explain. Something that you may have glimpsed on the side of the road as you were driving by.
A little bit. I also wanted to say, because I think that for anybody who's listened to all of our podcast episodes to this point, first of all, thank you. You guys are awesome. And
you're real troopers.
Yes, you are real troopers. But for anyone who's listened to all of the episodes, they might think, oh my gosh, these people have a story for everything. How many experiences do these people have? Well, if you were to ask me, I'd be like, I haven't really had very many experiences. But I guess there's a lot of little things, that have happened and I've been able to retell. But I promise that very soon, within the next couple episodes, probably, we're going to run out of personal experience stories to tell you.
I don't know about that, because I think if you ask the average person, have you ever had an unexplained or paranormal incident in your life? A lot of them are probably going to say no.
Yeah.
But then if you interview them
mm-hmm.
and you say, okay, you've never seen a ghost, but have you ever seen something you couldn't explain?
Yeah.
And then if you give them an opportunity to think about it, everybody has had experiences in their life that they can't explain.
Yeah.
Some are very mundane, but if you cast them in the light of the supernatural,
mm-hmm.
they take on a different hue.
Yeah.
And I think that I'd be one of those people who said, no, I really haven't. Yet when we talk about things on this show, I realize, something like that kind of happened to me once, or it calls to mind this incident. So it may very well be that we are living paranormal lives and we don't even realize
we don't even know it,
because we're distracted by television, by the internet, and all that good stuff. 200 years ago, there was a lot more supernatural stuff going on in the world than there is today, I believe.
Okay.
At least that was accepted and believed. Back then, witches were real, Witches
are real. So anyway, back to your question. Yes, kind of.
Oh, what was my question? I asked you if you'd ever experienced anything
if I'd ever experienced
seen something,
a cryptid type thing. So I don't really know. long story short, and I haven't told this story in a million years because it kind of got ruined for me, but I will give you the broad strokes and then I'll tell you how it was ruined for me. Many years ago, when I was in like junior high, my aunt and uncle threw a Halloween party for a bunch of kids. So I was there. My cousin was there. My cousins were there. I think all of my cousins. And then like a bunch of their friends. And there was probably 20 of us, 20 kids there.
Whoa.
And yeah, so we went up to my cousin's family cabin up in the mountains. And it, all night long we were playing games and the adults were trying to spook us and, just doing stupid things that was very obviously them. And then they said, okay, well, we're going to go for a walk outside. I think they told us some scary story about something that had happened out there. I don't know. But I remember we walked out and we were walking down the mountain and it's pitch black. It's the middle of the night and we're walking through campsites. There's nobody camping in them, but we're walking through them. And I heard a sound up in a tree. And I turned and I looked, and from my memory, it was like a thin, like an aspen tree. It's not like a big, these big, huge, sturdy branches. Like this type of tree, like a full-grown man would not be able to climb this tree and hang out at the top of the tree. So I look up and I swear there's this thing, like a white thing, looking down at us, and it's like moving its head in this weird, like, pendulum. Does that make sense? A weird pendulum type motion.
Yeah.
And so we freak out and we start running. And the thing, I remember seeing it jump down out of the tree, but that could just be, in my panic brain, this was 30 years ago head, So we run back to the cabin and there was more to it, but I can't even remember now at this point. There was something about it was looking in the windows at us. And a few years later, my aunt said, no, it was all a joke, that they pulled all that. Oh, something was chasing us. Something came through. That's why we started running, was because somebody came through running at us from the other side of the campground. But it wasn't the thing in the tree. So anyway, my aunt said, no, it was a joke. It was, we were just trying to scare you guys. And I said, well, who was the one up in the tree? And she's like, there was nobody in the tree. It was just so-and-so came running around the side to scare you. But I know that I saw this thing in the tree. That's right. And then I saw it. It was in the gutter off the side of the road, because we ran out of the campground onto the road and we turned around and we were looking down the road and it was crouched in the gutter, this white thing. And it was still like doing that weird pendulum thing with its head. And that's when we ran back to the thing. But yeah, that's how it got ruined for me. My aunt said that the adults were trying to scare us, but she said there was nothing in the tree and she doesn't remember anything in the gutter. But
that sounds like something out of a movie. And when I say that, I'm not saying that that this is a made up story on your part. What I'm saying is that you see these kinds of things happen in movies where there's a guy, it's a horror movie, and there's a guy and he's pulling a prank on these people. He's sneaking up behind them, and then suddenly the real killer shows up and pops out of the shadows, or the monster or whatever.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So there's somebody pretending to be the bad guy who jumps out with the knife and it startles you, and then you realize, oh, it's not a bad guy. Your guard is let down, and that's when the real bad guy steps in and does the murdering. Yeah, I understand that.
Well, I think that you could take something from your memory and maybe make a definitive statement as to whether or not something strange did happen. Because you have to ask yourself, were any of the adults that were there intending to scare you, were any of them capable, you think, of pulling off that kind of physical performance.
No, I don't think so.
With the swinging head, the penduluming neck and stuff like that.
Well,
who would even think to do that?
In my memory, this thing was kind of small too, like child size. And actually, years later, when I started doing like some internet research on different cryptids, I came across the Dover Demon. So the Dover Demon is a creature reportedly sighted in the town of Dover, Massachusetts on April 21st and April 22nd of 1977. So when I discovered the Dover Demon, I swear to you, this is what it looked like. Yeah, if you Google search the Dover Demon.
Well, and
that's pretty much what I saw.
We'll put a link to this in the show notes. So yeah, that's kind of exactly what I picture in my head when you describe it.
Yeah. But I mean, clearly I'm nowhere near Dover, Massachusetts, but I mean, that's pretty much what I saw. So if you've ever seen anything like that, or if you saw the Dover Demon, we want to hear all of these things.
Yeah, the castle isn't just limited to ghost stories. We are also all about the cryptids.
Oh, we love cryptids.
And the UFOs and the Bigfoots.
Mm-hmm. That's cryptid.
Yeah, I guess Bigfoot is a cryptid. But
spontaneous human combustion? Sure.
Oh.
I mean, we don't want that to happen to you or to us, but...
No.
But if you have stories about it...
Didn't we see a documentary about spontaneous human combustion?
Of course.
And it was absolutely fascinating.
And terrifying. When I was a kid, I was terrified that I was going to spontaneously combust.
Most kids were, really worried about quicksand.
Yeah.
And sinkholes, earthquakes.
Hey, I'm afraid of sinkholes, man.
Yeah. But here you were afraid of...
I was afraid of spontaneous human combustion.
As well you should be.
Don't judge me.
Well, you stand too close to a hot stove, you get burned. And it teaches you a lesson. It teaches that something else could happen.
It's true.
Whatever that means.
What? Vince, do you hear that music? What is that?
Oh, what?
Yeah, do you hear it?
I do hear that.
What is that music?
Well, I can tell you what that music is.
Please do.
I've been doing a lot of rummaging through old boxes as we've been, because we just moved into the castle. Mm-hmm. We have been familiar with the castle for 20 years.
But now we have access to all of its contents that have been hidden away for decades.
Exactly. And in my digging through boxes, I came across what you're listening to right now. Actually, what this is the MIDI file that used to play upon launching the Castle of Spirits website back in 1999.
What?
So the one thing that I cannot do is I cannot identify what piece of music this is.
Or who made it.
Who made it, who composed it. It's like I said, it's a MIDI file. You try and if you try to soundhound the song, you come up with nothing. At least we come up with nothing.
So those of you who have been with the castle for all of these years, if you have any information on where this piece of music came from, please let us know. We would love to know who created it and just the whole backstory on it.
Any help is appreciated.
Absolutely. I guess on that note, we will say thank you for listening to our episode today, and we will see you again very soon. Please feel free to email us at cosghostkeepers.com.
At gmail.com.
cosghostkeepers@gmail.com. If you have any questions, comments, information, whatever, and submit your stories through castlespirits.com/submit. Say goodnight, Vince.
Good night, Vince. And see you next Wednesday.